wrestling fans.
Are you ready? Let me tell you something, brother. British Wrestling's very own Steve Saxon presents the iSax Wrestling Podcast. It's just one more platform for him to get his shit in.
And welcome to the first ever episode of the iSax Wrestling Podcast with me, your host, British wrestling personality, owner and founder of Britannia Wrestling Promotions, and generally a guy with just a lot to say. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Steve Saxon. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you joining me on what is the pilot episode, the first episode of what will hopefully become a regular occurrence. I hope to bring you these podcasts bi-weekly, every 2 weeks, where we will talk about, we will discuss, we will pick apart everything to do with the world of wrestling at the moment. And I'm not just talking the major league guys, I'm not just talking WWE, I'm not just talking TNA and Ring of Honor, I'm talking about wrestling and wrestlers from all over the globe. And I will not be doing it alone. I will be bringing in guys, friends of mine who work within the wrestling business, within the podcasting business, but who are ultimately still avid wrestling fans. Guys that follow the major league guys, guys that follow the Japanese scene, guys that follow and support the independent scene. And that's what this show is all about. We will be covering as many different aspects of the wrestling business as possible. But what sets us aside, what makes us different to every other wrestling podcast, which there seems to be more and more cropping up every week, including this one, the iSax Wrestling Podcast. Well, what makes us a little bit different is it won't just be 100% wrestling talk. We will be talking about things that are going on in my life outside of the wrestling business and some of the things that are going on the inside of the wrestling business. I will not hold back. I have an opinion on most things and I will quite happily put my opinion across. Will it be favourable by everybody? Absolutely not. Will everybody agree what I'm saying? Absolutely not, but it should be worth a good listen anyway. It's going to be a little bit controversial because that's the way I roll. Controversy creates cash. A wise man and a fellow podcaster, Eric Bischoff, once said that, and he is absolutely right. So that's what we aim to bring you. And of course, I will also be adding the elements of music. Local bands, local artists from up and down the UK and England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales will be featured on this podcast, including this podcast, which we will get onto in a few moments' time. So what I want to do is I want to really focus on allowing some of these young bands, these young artists who are trying to break the music industry, which is a very, very hard industry to break, much harder than the wrestling industry these days. It's so easy, sometimes too easy to break into the wrestling business these days. So what I want to do is I want to take these artists and these bands, I want to play their music on this podcast. I want to tell you a little bit about them. I want you to go out and check them out. I want you to download their content and give them a support. Great British acts. British music has always been the absolute pillar of the music community, and moving forward into the future I can't see that's going to be any different. I've spoken to a lot of bands, I've listened to a lot of bands' music and artists' music that have contacted me over social media since I announced what this podcast was going to be about, and there's some great sounds out there, there's some great artists out there, and I want you to experience that with me. I'm fortunate enough that I have quite a strong following on social media, so when I ask bands and artists to get in touch with me, to send me their music, to send me their tracks, to send me their links and downloads, that I had quite a high response straight away. And I spent pretty much 24 hours just going through all of the emails, all of the messages, just listening to these music. I don't want to just say, send me your stuff and I'll put it on there and I'll see your Twitter handles and what have you. I want to actually engage with these artists and bands. I want to actually be able to listen and experience their music myself before I even consider putting it up on my podcast. So I hope you enjoy what's going to come. In this episode and every episode moving forward, I should imagine it's going to carry a similar format. Things will change up slightly, things will be amended, things will be thrown in last minute, taken away. It's what the wrestling business is pretty much alike, so I can't see what the podcast industry is going to be any different. So, on this episode, we're going to have a couple of good friends of mine. They are involved in the wrestling business with me. They work with me over at Britannia Wrestling Promotions. They work on production. They work on podcasting. They work on hiring the international talent that is out there. These are the two guys that know this business inside and out, from not just working within the business, but being lifelong fans, just like you, just like me, just like most people. But these guys don't just follow the big leaguers. They don't just follow WWE. They do. But as well as WWE, they will watch TNA, they will watch Ring of Honor, they will watch New Japan, they will follow the independent wrestling scene from all over the world. And when I speak to these guys, sometimes they're talking about, have you seen this, have you seen that, have you seen that, did you watch that match over on New Japan, did you see this match? And I'm like, I'm completely lost. I don't have the time, unfortunately. I do need to make time. I will make time in the future for the sake of this podcast, if nothing else, to actually follow and get behind and support the independents a lot more. Over here in the UK, obviously the British wrestling scene at the moment is absolutely booming. It's never been so red hot. The talent that are coming out of the UK at the moment is amazing. I'm very fortunate that I stuck with the British wrestling scene. When I first got into the wrestling scene myself as a very young trainee at the age of 16, back in 1997, 1998, under the guidance of Welsh wrestling icon and legend Orig El Bandito Williams in Rhyl, North Wales, the wrestling industry in this country was kind of on its backside. We were doing tribute shows where we'd dress up as the famous TV WWE superstars. And the common consensus was by the old school guys that the business is fucked, job's fucked. That's what I used to hear all the time. Kid, don't try and make anything out of this. You might get a couple of months, you might get a couple of years at max, but that's it. After that, there's going to be no British wrestling because there's no proper British wrestlers out there. I stuck at it. I never believed that was true. I never said anything. Of course I didn't. I knew my place, but I never believed that British wrestling was dying. And over the years, I stuck at it, I stuck with it, as a lot of people did, as a lot of people have. And it's proven to be successful. It's proven that British wrestling doesn't have to be about advertising American wrestling on your posters. It doesn't mean that you have to dress up as Jeff Hardy or The Undertaker or Stone Cold Steve Austin or whoever just to get over, just to make some money. British wrestling is its own commodity now, and it's been recognised on a global platform. And we're going to talk a little bit about that a little bit later on. So yeah, music, wrestling, and Steve Saxon. That's what this podcast is going to be all about. So sit down, grab a brew. If you're driving to work, keep your eyes on the road, turn the radio up a little bit. If you're sat in the house doing the dishes, if you're cooking tea, turn the radio up a little bit. Enjoy it. So as well as wrestling talk, as well as talk of myself and my life, Steve Saxon, as well as bringing to you music that you have never heard before, but hopefully will hear more of in the future, I will also be bringing to you an interview, a superstar interview, every couple of weeks. And on the first ever episode, on this episode, you're going to have an extra special interview. It's special because it runs over onto 2 episodes. That's right, I sincerely fucked up. My timings were completely out. I enjoyed this interview so much that I just let it go on and on and on. And as you will listen to it, hopefully you'll listen to both episodes, you'll understand why I let it go on, because it's so damn interesting and everybody deserves to hear the story that this person has to tell. My first guest on the iSax Wrestling Podcast is a British wrestling living legend, a person that raised bars, broke boundaries, and in turn has become one of the biggest names in British wrestling history. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest today on the first ever episode of iSax Wrestling Podcast is none other than Klondyke Jayne Hansford. And we'll get onto that at the end of this podcast. Like I said, I did have to split it into 2, so you get the first half of the interview on this podcast, and if you go back onto iTunes and find episode 2, you'll find the second half there as well. And now we're going to kickstart the show with a little music. Before we get onto the wrestling talk, before we get onto the road stories and the talk of Saxon, we're going to listen to some brand new music. Now, the band that I'm going to feature on this first show, on the pilot episode of iSax Wrestling Podcast, is a band called Law. That's L-O-R, Law. Like Lord without the D. That's what he told me to pronounce it. They're a 3-piece rock outfit from Wrexham in North Wales in the UK. Pretty local to me. I actually know the lead singer personally. I know his family personally. I'm good friends with members of his family. His family are respected businessmen and women from this neck of the woods in North Wales. And I know that this guy, the lead singer, Craig Mills, who's the lead vocalist, he's the guitar player. I know he's worked very, very hard with his bandmates to try and get their sound out there on a bigger platform. Hopefully this will help just a little bit. But I'll give you all the links in a minute. Head over to YouTube, head over to their Twitter and the Facebook accounts. Sign them up. You want to be searching for L-O-R, Law. three-piece rock band from Wrexham, North Wales. They try to blend rock and electronica to form a fresh and alternative sound, stemming from a huge range of influences. And I think as soon as you hear the song, you'll probably pick up on a couple of those influences and who they are. So that's enough about song. I think you really need to experience this sound. I really am digging this song. This is the band Lore, L-O-R, and their debut single, Shadows. Enjoy.
Time comes, you stare death in the eyes. You're asking, where the hell are we going? He'll grab you by your arms and say that you don't wanna know, you don't wanna know, you don't wanna know. Your arms around the ones you hold dear. You know that they won't be here forever. You can hear a distant call that scares you to death. It scares you to death. It scares you to death.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. When I was scrolling through the endless emails and messages from local artists and bands who'd sent me their sounds over for me to have a listen to before I decided who's going to be on the pilot episode, this is one that really stood out to me. I really like the sound. I love the sound of Oasis in there. I love the sound of Take That in there. I absolutely love it. Now, they've been together since 2011. They've recently rebranded themselves. They used to be called The Origin. They are now Lore, like Lord, without the D. Remember that? So they're going to be releasing this song that you just heard now in summer of 2017, so just a couple of months away. So all links and all updates will be available via the iSax Wrestling Podcast Facebook page, and of course the Twitter handle at iSax Podcast. So keep your eyes peeled for those. They will also be doing extensive touring and shows up and down Wales, up and down northwest of England. So if you happen to be wandering down the high street and see a poster up on the lamppost saying featuring Law, like Lord without the D, then you know that you've heard it here first. Get to their gigs, support what they're doing, and really get behind and encourage them. I want to thank Craig, Ben and Jake for letting me play their music on the pilot episode of the iSax Wrestling Podcast. I will be staying in touch with them. As soon as they bring out new content, I will try and get it featured on the podcast as well. So good luck, guys. Everybody get behind and give them a follow and support. Okay, so now we're going to have a look at the world of wrestling, the international independent movement that it is at the moment. The wrestling business from Japan to America, from Canada to Britain is absolutely red hot right now. And I've got with me today two guys who are very, very good friends of mine. Two guys that I work with over at Britannia Wrestling Promotions. They work with me on production. They work with booking. They said international talent for me. These guys also are podcasters and lifelong wrestling fans. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to my good friends, Michael R. Holland III, aka DJ King, and that duck guy, Chris Dutton. Welcome, guys. Welcome to the iSax Wrestling Podcast.
Thank you very much for having us, Mr. Steve Saxon, Esquire.
You're very welcome.
It's good at adding things to each other's names now.
So how you doing, guys? How's the world of wrestling been for you two guys?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, British wrestling itself, probably, the hottest it's ever been. I mean, obviously, you've got the World of Sport now, Revival, and, the WWE's UK tournament. I mean, really, at the moment, British wrestling's on a level I don't think I've ever seen personally, as long as I've been a fan. I mean, it's really has taken off in the past sort of 12 months or so.
Well, I completely agree with that, guys. I mean, earlier on in the podcast, I did mention that when I first got into this business, all the what are now old-timers, the common consensus used to be that, kid, if you're getting in this business to make money long-term, don't bother, the business is fucked. And this is like 1997, 1998, when I was 16 years old. And British wrestling has changed, and it did die on its arse for a few years. But over the last 3 to 4 years, I'd say it's gone through a massive boom. And it's amazing to see where the British wrestling talent, the homegrown talent, where they are on the global platform of wrestling these days.
So yeah, I mean, you talk to a lot of old timers, and they'll say like, "Oh, it was a lot harder to get into the business 20 years ago," and that is true to an extent. I mean, there is obviously a lot more training school these days, but I mean, the level of talent that has come through those training schools kind of speaks for itself.
I mean, we are at a time now in British wrestling where obviously we've had years and years of just influence from the States. For even the likes of WWE, obviously it was the reason World of Sport died when it did originally. WWE became this big conglomerate and it took over the wrestling world. There wasn't territories like there used to be. The British wrestling scene was dead on its ass because of people having Sky TV and being able to watch WWE. But that also then created a whole generation, which is our generation, I think, because I definitely count myself as one of them kids, who then discovered wrestling, like the art form of wrestling from the States, and have then adapted it. A lot of guys, you see a lot of guys mixing in the British style, the old school British style, with this modern day high flying, high adrenaline, high impact style wrestling that we've all become so used to. And I mean, just to name a few, you've got the likes of Pete Dunne, Mark Andrews, you've got Zach Gibson. All these guys are going out there and they're mixing together these styles in such a way that is really it's really gripping not just the UK crowd but the rest of the world now. The rest of the world has looked from every other spot of the world now and gone, oh shit, look what's going on in British wrestling. British wrestling is it's back, and that's what we want. I mean, we want to be known, but at the end of the day, we were known as the wrestlers back then. And I think British wrestlers are going to be known as the wrestlers to watch once again.
I remember back in my early days of Oric Williams when some well-known American wrestlers, guys like X-Pac and Natty Neidhart, they would come over to the UK. They would be sent to the UK by the WWE, by WCW, particularly WCW back in the day, to come and actually learn the trade properly the way the Brits do it. And once they learn that trade, they'd go back over there and make a name for themselves with the big leagues. But as you were saying then, guys like Zach Gibson, Zach Gibson, Nixon Newell, CJ Banks, Pete Dunne, absolutely Pete Dunne. These guys are not just working within the UK now. They are being booked. They are now the new imports. What we traditionally know imports has been is when we bring guys over from America into this country. Now it's the other way around. Obviously that still happens, but our guys are going over to America getting booked over there. Our guys are spending weeks and months on end over in Japan. So they're taking the British style that's changed over the years because of the American influence when we were all kids, and they're taking that over to Japan and picking up a little bit of their influence and bringing it back to our country and sharing that with all the other trainees and wrestlers. And we're just getting better and better and better.
I mean, if we're going to mention going over to the States and also working in Japan, there's two names that we've all neglected to mention. Those names are Will Ospreay and Marty Scurll.
Absolutely.
Scurll is currently the Ring of Honor TV champion. He won that title from Ospreay, who won it from Bobby Fish the night 2 nights previous. I mean, Ospreay won the Best of the Super Juniors, or was it the Super Juniors? It's something to do with the Super Juniors, Super J Cup or something last year in Japan. I can't remember. New Japan has so many different tournaments; it's hard to keep track sometimes. But he won the Best of the Super Juniors last year. Not only is that a big deal at such a young age, he's the first British wrestler to ever win that. I mean, British wrestlers are never normally known for their high flying, but Ospreay is obviously he's a cut above the rest. Him and Scurll have gone over and made such an impact in the States. I mean, PWG, Ring of Honor, these are two of the biggest companies in America if you don't count WWE. Now, these are the companies that fans have their eyes on and are watching because they know the next crop of great wrestlers is going to come up out of these establishments. And Ospreay and Scurll are in the perfect place right now to be wrestling wise. And to be representing representing the United Kingdom, it's it's a great time to be a really good British wrestler.
I was gonna chip in, but to be honest, Mike, you took the exact words out of my mouth. Those are the exact two names I was about to bring up. So you kind of stole my thunder on that one. So cheers.
I'm sorry, Chris, but I mean, they are the stars at the moment. It's great to see so many other guys making their way over to the States. I know Progress on a whole are sending over like a lot of guys to work over there because the Progress name, the name Progress as a wrestling company is famous in the States now, which is rare.
Which is funny in itself because Progress as a company was built as kind of having the mentality of we don't use imports ourselves. We rely on just purely 99% British talent. And to see now Progress sort of being booked over in the States and in Canada, it's just amazing to see kind of the level we've gotten to now. Like you say, Steve, that's considered now. We are considered the hot imports. We are considered the hotbed of like underrated professional wrestling, and like wherever you look, our guys are getting booked over there. You look at another guy, Travis Banks, for example. Now, he's making waves now on the UK scene. It's just you see these names. I mean, I'll throw another one out there. It's kind of getting there now, and I think in the next couple of days he's going to be an absolutely huge name. Son of Durson. I read our friends up in Manchester, up in Future Shock. Hearing all this buzz about this match last night they held between Son of Durson and Travis Banks. I've heard 6 stars, 5 stars thrown around. Like I can't wait to watch that. And you wonder if they ever get booked over there, what kind of an impact they're going to have in the States. I mean, would they end up in the WWE? Would they end up on the Ring of Honor like Marty Scurll? Marty Scurll, in my opinion, is probably one of the top 2 most underrated wrestlers in the world. That's just my opinion, but it's just amazing.
So why do you think that he's not been picked up by the likes of NXT and WWE so far? I mean, it's pretty, it's not obvious, but it's likely that he's going to end up in NXT or WWE, but why is it taking this long?
No, I don't think it's a case of taking this long. I mean, Scurll has a fantastic gimmick now. The villain gimmick, the way he plays it, I mean, he was always a great wrestler, don't get me wrong. But now he's found his feet with this gimmick, the villain. And people love it, people are eating it up. He doesn't need to go to WWE anytime relatively soon, to be completely honest. He can continue, building his name off that. You find this a lot nowadays. Guys are building a name for themselves before they're going in. Guys don't need necessarily to just get picked up and signed by WWE straight away. It's a lot of guys are going out there making a name. Will Ospreay and Marty Scurll probably could have, they could have put the feelers out. They could have signed for WWE at some point. No, they are there making a name off their own backs, working in the best places possible, so that when they eventually do get there, I can, personally, I think the goal for everyone is to eventually get there. Whether you really truly believe it or not, I mean, most, 9 times out of 10, you ask a guy, that's where they want to be, because that's wrestling.
That's where the money is.
That's where the money is.
It's like any other business. If you go and work for McDonald's as a cashier, eventually if you're planning on staying at McDonald's, you want to be a manager because you're going to get more money. The wrestling industry has changed, but it also remains the same. WWE are the big hitters. That's where you want to be. But I agree with exactly what you said there, Mike. The fact that these days guys are kind of encouraged to go out and make their own name, get their own following. We've seen with NXT that they've taken on certain guys like El Generico. Now, El Generico wasn't allowed to keep his gimmick, and he got rebranded as Sami Zayn, and he's been doing okay at the moment. He's been getting a bit of a push. But then you have other guys that have come on board, like AJ Styles, who's allowed to keep his gimmick. Because I think in between, somewhere in between Sami Zayn and AJ Styles, kind of, WWE have realised, well, it's okay. It's one thing bringing in the indie talent that all the fans are ranting and raving about, but it's another thing bringing them in and rebranding them. AJ's come in and gone straight to the top. El Generico came in, got rebranded, and it's kind of been floating. He's doing well. He's earning money. He's getting TV time, but he's kind of floating around the lower mid card to the mid card. And from things I've been reading over the past couple of days, that push now that certain top faces in WWE are coming back is going to come to an end. So I absolutely agree. I think the key to success to getting into NXT or WWE or both is to go out there these days, make a name for yourself, get out, work as many indie scenes. It's okay, a lot of guys go and work over to Japan, but I was listening to a podcast with Jim Ross a couple of days ago when he actually pointed out that the Japanese market, although on the global scale they are considered the number 2 next to WWE, their Japanese market is only a quarter of the size of that of the WWE market.
That is true, but you've got to remember they've only just New Japan have not long launched their streaming site. It's fantastic if you can get hold of it, but it seems to be a lot of people are having trouble subscribing internationally with it. I think the States have finally got it sorted, but a lot of people are having trouble signing up with that internationally. I think once that can take off, it could be it'll be just like the network.
Exactly.
Just like the WWE network.
Yeah.
People will be able to get access to New Japan whenever they want it, and that'll be fantastic. But Steve, going back to what you said then, I mean, like the differences between, say, a Sami Zayn and an AJ Styles, right? AJ Styles was as close as you can get to being a household name wrestling-wise without going to WWE.
Yes.
Right? El Generico, as famous as he was, and he was, people knew who El Generico was. He was fantastic, but he was not at that level. If you'd have brought El Generico out at the Royal Rumble, he would have got a pop. If you brought Sami Zayn out at the Royal Rumble, no one would have known who that was, right? I understand that they wanted to drop the mask. Calling him El Generico is not going to get over on TV. It's a joke on anyone under a mask. They were never going to let him keep that gimmick. It was just not going to happen. But they were never going to rebrand AJ Styles either. They had no need to. Because you bring him in, you go, this is one of the most decorated guys who's never been in this company. He went over to, obviously WWE will always acknowledge Japan. They'll never acknowledge TNA. They'll never acknowledge that he was the poster child for TNA for over 10 years. They'll never say that. But what they will say is, oh, he went to Japan and he made an absolute huge name for himself in Japan.
Yeah.
And to be honest, AJ Styles was only there for maybe a year, 2 years tops. Chris, I might be wrong, but I don't think I am on that one.
Yeah, it was a couple of years, I think. Between when he left TNA and before joining WWE, it was about 2 or 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah, and he spent the first year of that just working Ring of Honor in the Indies, and then it was like the night that Finn Balor left. Prince Devitt left WWE, left New Japan, and became Finn Balor. That was the night AJ Styles debuted in New Japan, and that was it. He 2 years himself. Anderson, Gallows, Kenny Omega. We will get onto Kenny Omega shortly, though, as a whole separate entity. That's a whole different conversation we need to have on this podcast.
I mean, you look at someone like Sami Zayn, Generico, and then you look at someone like AJ Styles, but then you've kind of got that middle ground where you've got your Kevin Owens, where he kind of kept the gimmick, but they changed the name. Do we think that's because, although like himself and Generico were kind of like very well-known names on the indie scene, they didn't have that kind of worldwide exposure like AJ Styles had in Japan. Therefore, WWE could say, oh, AJ Styles went to Japan, he's worldwide superstar. Whereas someone like Kevin Owens or Kevin Steen, they'd basically be having to plug Ring of Honor if they kind of were talking about where he'd been. Do you think that's the reason why AJ Styles kept his name and his gimmick?
I think you can get away with changing Kevin Steen to Kevin Owens, right? He was same as the El Generico. No, maybe not as much as El Generico, but they brought Kevin Steen in, and he had his gimmick. His gimmick has been what it's always been. He's a big, nasty bastard who wears a t-shirt, talks shit, and gets and beats people up. And he's always been fantastic at doing that. I followed Steen / Owens from the Indies, and he's a personal favourite of mine. I was made up when he got signed, but it didn't dampen it for me in any way when he said, right, we're changing the name, and he was Kevin Owens. It made no difference to me. The thing is, AJ Styles, he's a different level again. It's like Samoa Joe. They didn't change anything about Samoa Joe.
I was just going to say that to you. What about Samoa Joe? Because he's in that situation where you just said then, WWE won't acknowledge TNA particularly, but Ring of Honor, they have subtly in the past mentioned Ring of Honor.
Yeah.
So if they weren't willing to do that with somebody like Sami Zayn, Generico, why would they be willing to keep the Samoa Joe gimmick? Why?
I think
without referencing where they've been in the past, because Joe, I'm assuming he spent time in Japan, but not a lot of time.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. Joe was in Japan. He was working for Noah.
So it was nothing significant. He did nothing significant. It was that long ago. Why would they allow somebody like Samoa Joe to come on board, keep the name, keep the gimmick, recognise that he is somewhat of a household name, but he's only ever worked for Ring of Honor and TNA?
Well, here's another guy who we've neglected to talk about in this conversation because he is relevant to it. Hideo Itami, when he got signed to WWE, he was Kenta. Everyone knew him as Kenta. Kenta, the guy who created the GTS. Right? He was a big name in Japan, and they brought him over and changed it. Around about the same time was when Sami Zayn got brought in, and he was changed from El Generico to Sami Zayn. I think now they've reached the point where WWE management is saying, do you know what? Maybe we don't need to change all these guys' names. We brought Shinsuke Nakamura in, we didn't change his name. We brought Samoa Joe in, we don't need to change his name. Bobby Roode, Eric Young,
Austin Aries,
Roderick Strong. All these are all guys who are at the same level as Generico and Steen, yet they've kept their names. I think it's literally just an attitude change on the part of management.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
Yeah, I agree.
I think maybe someone said, are we not insulting the fans' intelligence here? We know who these guys are.
Yeah, exactly.
Certain guys needed a name change. I mean, Adrian Neville, before he was Adrian Neville, he was Pac. He was Pac. P-A-C. That was it. And as great as that name was for the Indies, he'd always be associated with X-Pac or whatever.
Of course you
would. Let him keep that name. Right? Guys who go out and make a name for themselves are going to get to keep their names. It was like that years ago. Chris Jericho. They signed Chris Jericho from WCW. Did he keep his name or did he change it? Perry Saturn, Dean Malenko, Eddie Guerrero,
Chris Benoit.
All guys who had their names in WCW and kept them when they came over because those names were value. And I think now WWE's realising that all these indie guys, their name has value when they bring them in.
Do you think the fans' attitudes have changed because of the way that NXT have gone over recent years? The way that basically, if the fans make enough noise about a particular talent, the WWE are looking at them. Triple H seems to have really opened the doors for new talent like that. For the indie darlings, if you like. Are the fans now going out there and looking for this new talent and investing their time and attention in this new talent, knowing that if they really get behind them and make enough noise collectively, that Triple H and NXT are going to be looking at them, and there's more chance that they're going to be brought up to the big stage?
I can't see why not. I can't see how. I don't think a company like WWE is going to be ignorant to what their audience is watching.
Although they have been blamed, they've been accused of that for many years, many occasions, that they are quite ignorant to what the fans are shouting for and what the fans are wanting.
Yeah, but I'm sorry, right? I'm sorry. I have to say this, and I'll be the heel in this scenario. But I think a lot of the time, wrestling fans are idiots. Because you will sit there, right? No, right. Hear me out, right? How long ago did CM Punk leave WWE?
Well, that was about 3 years ago now, 3-4 years ago.
Yeah.
Why are fans still chanting for him? He's not coming back. There's only so far you can go. All right, we'll trust our audience.
I think the fans, the thing with the CM Punk chant, I think the fans have just kind of adopted that as a way of voicing that they don't like what is happening, like either on the screen at that time. You always get it during a promo where they don't want to be listening to it.
And I think it's turned into a game now as well, hasn't it? I mean,
It's kind of protest.
Absolutely. But recently on Raw, they were chanting when Stephanie McMahon was cutting a promo in the ring, and they started chanting for CM Punk, and then she had some sort of comeback, some retort. Triple H has done it, Vince McMahon's done it, and I think the WWE management and workers have got that used to it happening, especially when they're in certain places like Chicago, when it's inevitable that it's going to happen. They've got their retorts, they've got them there lined up ready, and I think it's become a bit of a game between the fans and the WWE personnel that it's going to happen. We can't do anything about that. So if we react in a certain way, it may encourage them to stop doing it. It hasn't. It's encouraged them to do it more and more. It's become a game. It's no different than when was the last time that Stone Cold Steve Austin wrestled? 12, 13 years ago now?
Yeah. That's got to be sort of.
There is still a weekly watch chance on Raw and SmackDown.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that as well, because think how long after Stone Cold left were they still doing that? They were still doing that chant regularly up to about 5 years ago, that I can remember. And since CM Punk leaves, and now that's like the new flavour of the week. And it's only a matter of time before they find something else. Obviously, I think everyone knows that he's not coming back.
Do you think he will ever come back?
I would never say never on anyone coming back into
wrestling. If Triple H has got anything to do with management, like he kind of has now, he's obviously got that influence. I think he's responsible for a lot of this happening with a lot of the guys coming. Obviously, he is. I think it's only a matter of time before something. If he pushed hard enough for it, I think they could probably work something out.
I mean, a lot of people have gone on record as saying that Vince McMahon, he doesn't hold a grudge, or he can hold a grudge, but if he's going to make money, he will make money. If CM Punk turns up on Raw, or turns up at the Rumble or WrestleMania or the Raw after Mania, that's going to make money for WWE, hands down. Vince McMahon will never turn away the opportunity to make money and to make headlines, which is worth just as much as money sometimes. CM Punk coming back after his big defeat at UFC, and after everything that's been said and everything that's gone on, that is huge news in the wrestling industry.
It is, but do you know what? Personally, I'd love to see. I mean, I'm a big CM Punk fan. I'd love to see him wrestle again, but not in WWE. I'd love to see him go back to Ring of Honor.
Yeah.
I'd love to see him. I'd love to see him now in New Japan. The stars and the talent that New Japan have now. He'd rule over there.
And what a move that would be for Japan, who, as you're saying, with their new streaming service that they're trying to get kick-started, to have CM Punk turn up and be featured on that streaming, so that would be an excellent move for the Japanese.
Also, after being the mark that I am, watching a nice long Q&A with the Bullet Club, they did say if they were going to add a member, their member would be, if they could pick anyone, the only one they'd pick would be CM Punk.
And that'd be a nice way for CM Punk to get back into the business. He doesn't kind of have to eat humble pie and go begging back to Vince McMahon and the WWE. He gets back in the wrestling business on his own terms, which we all know that he likes to work that way. And he goes to Japan. He goes to the competition, if you want. Like I said, Japan, on the couple of podcasts I've been listening to, is the second biggest wrestling movement within the world. So for him to go there, it's like a big kick in the balls to WWE. So guys, I did mention briefly to the listeners that I am not the biggest follower of what I call the underground independent movement. I'm certainly not the biggest fan of Japanese wrestling, strictly because I don't have the time to follow them all. You guys do. You guys make the effort to go out there and find out what's happening to the talents and the promotions all over the world before they get to WWE. So tell us a little about what's been going on at the indie firms over in Japan. Tell us what's been going on. What's the latest news coming out of it?
If we're going to talk about Japan, in my opinion, the only one that's worth talking about right now is New Japan Pro Wrestling. Obviously the second biggest company in the world now, and New Japan obviously coming off the back end of an absolutely stellar Wrestle Kingdom this year. I know you haven't seen it, Steve.
I've not seen it yet.
I know me and Chris have been screaming at you to watch Wrestle Kingdom because it's great now as well because. Yeah. It was a struggle watch. I mean, some people would have found it to be a struggle watching Japanese wrestling with only Japanese commentary. I know a lot of people like the immersion of listening to the commentary while watching wrestling. I'm one of them. And now that New Japan has it, they've signed this deal with Ring of Honor. They have Kevin Kelly, and it was Kevin Kelly and
Steve Corino originally.
But Steve Corino's left for reasons. And
what reasons are those?
We can't say because we don't know for definite. So
okay.
The rumors he's gotten a job down in Florida in some kind of center for enhancance or performance.
Okay.
I am Matt Hardy crypticing this up to fuck. I am. But like. Now, obviously, they've replaced him with this Cyrus, Canadian guy. I can't remember his second name, but it's still good. it's good to watch Japanese wrestling with English commentary. It is, you know, it makes you.
Where could I watch this? I intend to watch it. I don't want to watch the big, the big match, the big main event everyone's talking about. I want to watch the whole production. Where can I watch this?
Then you need to subscribe to New Japan World.
New Japan World.
And watch it on there. Just go online, search New Japan World, and there should be a translation on there for you to be able to subscribe to it. It's a fantastic service. It's definitely worth having, especially if you're a fan of New Japan Wrestling. Everyone should have this if they're a fan of New Japan Wrestling, because you get it all. All the matches, all the backstage footage, all the interviews, things like that. I mean, obviously, a lot of it's going to be in Japanese, but the big shows, you'll be able to get them with English commentary. Kevin Kelly, fantastic. Didn't think Kevin Kelly... I never thought Kevin Kelly was that good of a commentator until I heard him do Ring of Honor and New Japan stuff. But it's definitely worth a watch. Wrestle Kingdom on a whole, fantastic show this year. Then you've got we've just had the New Beginnings tour, and now they're about to start the Super J Cup. No, not the Super J Cup.
The New Japan Cup.
Again, Chris, how many tournaments? There's
too many. Too many, but they're all fucking awesome.
Oh, they are. I've never seen a New Japan show and gone, well, that was poor. Even the worst match on a New Japan show is better than most of the matches.
I will be completely honest. Out of all the rest, and I do watch a lot of wrestling, I cannot sit through a lot of WWE anymore. I will watch the pay-per-views. I will occasionally watch SmackDown. I cannot sit through Raw anymore. I have to watch highlights. New Japan, I can sit down for 4+ hours and I can watch the whole thing. And sometimes it can be a bit of a slug. I think Wrestle Kingdom was, 6 hours long or something ridiculous like that. I had to watch it in 2 sittings. But I could watch a whole show the whole way through and not get bored with it because it's that much of a variety. It's just the best wrestling you can watch in the world right now, in my opinion.
And hands down, the main event for Wrestle Kingdom this year was the best wrestling match I have seen in maybe 20 years. I mean, I to all the Steve's listeners out there, I said something to Steve the day after I watched that match. The match in question, obviously, being Kazuchika Okada versus Kenny Omega for the IWGP Heavyweight title. And this match was astounding. And I called up Steve the next day and said, I know you don't watch New Japan, mate, but have you watched this yet? Has anyone told you about it? And he was like, nope, not seen it, don't care, shite, New Japan. I don't care.
I don't think I said that, Mike. I don't think I said that.
And I said to him, and Steve, you can quote me on this, I said, it's better than Michaels versus Taker.
And I believe my response to that was, fuck off.
Fuck off. And I said no, and as a pure wrestling match, Omega versus Okada, it would probably be the best wrestling match I've ever seen. It got me out of my seat. The last thing to get me out of my seat was Kevin Nash randomly turning up at SummerSlam to powerbomb CM Punk, and that's because no one saw it coming. Since then, nothing wrestling has made me jump out of my seat, and it must have been the last 10 minutes of that match. I was on my feet, and just my jaw was on the floor. I've never seen two guys who've never wrestled in one-on-one competition before. That's another thing that not many people realise when it comes to this match. These guys might have worked each other in tag team matches, but they've never faced off one-on-one. And then that match at Wrestle Kingdom was just mind-blowingly good.
And of course, straight after they get the big props from Dave Meltzer from the Wrestling Observer, giving it a 6-star rating.
Well, what are you going to remember about that match? Sorry, Mike.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't even think, Steve said, they get big props from Meltzer. They deserved the big props from Meltzer for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because no one was going to, no one was going to touch that match this year. That is already last year I said the same thing about a Wrestle Kingdom match. The best match that happened last year was Nakamura versus AJ Styles at Wrestle Kingdom. And personally, I don't think that happened in January. Remember, Wrestle Kingdom is January every year. And for the whole year, I said nothing's going to beat that match. And personally, I don't think anything did. There was a lot of good matches that people talk about, a lot of hyped up matches like Ospreay and Ricochet. No one had ever seen anyone, flying the way those two were in that match. And it was great, but still didn't touch Nakamura and Styles for me. And I think it'll be the same this year. I don't think anything's going to touch Okada versus Omega. It was just astounding. It was just an absolute roller coaster of a match to
So
watch.
on that basis, Nakamura and Styles obviously both went over to the WWE. AJ up to the main roster and Nakamura to the NXT roster. Are we expecting the same thing for Okada and Omega then?
No.
You don't think that we're going to see them in WWE? Why?
No.
Why? What's the difference between them?
Okada is the poster boy for New Japan.
Okay.
And has gone on record many times saying that he wants to make New Japan the biggest wrestling company in the world.
Good on.
He has no interest in going anywhere else. And in fairness, Kenny Omega said the same thing. Kenny Omega he's a Japanophile. Everyone knows that he loves Japan.
How old is Omega?
30, mid-30s, is maybe?
Yeah, he's definitely early to mid-30s. He's not too old, but he has been around for a long time. Everyone seems to forget this. Kenny Omega's been wrestling for a long, long time. It's only now that people are starting to realise how good he actually is. I mean, the guy had an exhibition match with a 9-year-old girl, and it's one of the most entertaining things I've ever seen in my life.
I've seen that on Facebook.
Him and Kota Ibushi have wrestled that blow-up doll at DDT so many times, and still had fantastic matches with them every time.
What people have to remember about Okada and Omega is that match was 50 minutes long, and if you watch WWE try and put on a 50-minute or hour-long Iron Man match, that can feel like it can drag quite a bit. This match felt like a 20-minute match.
Yeah.
It just I've watched it about 5 or 6 times. It just flies by every single time. It's such an easy watch for such a long match.
I was listening to the Stone Cold podcast the other day where he actually had Dave Meltzer on there for the reason he heard that Dave Meltzer gave him a 6-star rating to this match, so he was adamant he was getting him on the show. And he said himself that he got sent the links to the match by a couple of fans and workers saying, dude, you got to watch this match. It's amazing. So he put it on for a couple of minutes, kind of lost interest, went back to it a couple of days later, watched it for 5 minutes, kind of lost interest a little bit, and then everyone was on his back. You've got to watch this, stick at it. It's a slow burner, but when he gets into it, and he said it was one of the greatest matches he's ever seen, and he was a little bit disappointed it took him so long to actually sit through the whole thing, but it's one of those matches where he did start off a bit slow, they're getting a feel for each other, but then there were so many false finishes, and he could not put it over enough.
The psychology of the match was genius. Kenny Omega never hit the one-winged angel, which is his finishing move. He never hit that move, which meant it kept the move. He might have lost the match, but it kept the move protected. Okada escaped it every time before he could hit him with it. Sorry, so he never made his finishing move look weak. Which to me just screams rematch.
Of course. Now, am I right? Was it the Tokyo Dome that this was held at?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Right, okay. And Okada went over in the match. That's right, yeah?
He did.
Yeah.
So I was just saying then, Mike, this is clearly, or you would like to think it's leading up to a rematch, and they were saying that Omega kind of looked genuinely disappointed at the end of this match that he didn't actually win this, because he believes it so much, so passionate about it. So do we expect in the rematch that Omega will finally hit that finishing move, and when he finally hits it, it will actually mean something, and he will go over? And if that does happen, what does that mean for Omega?
I think we're going to wait. We're going to see a bit of a break between seeing that match now. They recently just had Honor Rising over in Japan, which is the New Japan Ring of Honor cross-brand show, and obviously it very heavily featured Bullet Club because Bullet Club is a big faction in both companies. But they had a 8-man tag with Okada and Omega on opposite sides, and Omega's chomping at the bit to get his hands on Okada, and Okada Okada to me. He's very much the Rock, like the Japanese Rock. If you look at like Tanahashi as the John Cena of Japan, Okada's got that swagger. He's got that the old people's champ. People love him, but they know you can tell he's a dick, and that's why you love him. Okay. And that's the attitude that I get from Okada. And he calls himself the Rainmaker. He comes out, he puts his arms up in the air, and money falls from the sky. How much more big bollocks could you get than that? He gets in the ring and he just basically, he's like, nah, no, not interested in you. Give me Cody Rhodes. I'm not interested. And he basically fobs Kenny Omega off. He's like, I got no interest in fighting you. I'll beat you. And I think it's going to be, they're going to have to slow build it where Omega's going to have to earn another opportunity. Now, for anyone who hasn't seen the New Japan Cup, this might even include you, Chris. Like, Omega went up against Ishii in the first round.
Yeah, I've seen it.
a lot of
Holy
people
shit.
are like, oh, this is great. Omega's going to win the tournament. He's going to go on to challenge Okada again. It's going to be great. We'll get the rematch soon. Omega went out in the first round to Ishii. Nobody saw that coming. So if they're going to build, they definitely got to be building to Omega going after the strap again. But I think they're going to be building it very slow. I mean, Gato, who books New Japan, everyone knows he's a very big fan of Western wrestling. He's a very big fan of Mid-South and the old territories and stuff like that. It's been covered a lot in like different books and stuff. And he might be building to a slow burn. This could be another 12 months down the line. We might not have to have Omega versus Okada until the next Wrestle Kingdom. There's a possibility that could be what goes down. But when we do get that match again, one-on-one, it's going to be another absolute classic. It really will.
Right, guys, like I said, we're going to have to start wrapping this up very short, the segments of the podcast. So we spoke about Japan. Obviously, on the future episodes, we'll speak more about Japan, or you guys will speak more about Japan and educate me and my listeners. Let's go west a little bit. Let's just very briefly run over. There's been a lot of things going on. The wrestling business over in America over the last few weeks has been red hot. There's been a lot of things happening, and I'm talking on every platform. I'm talking TNA, Ring of Honor, and WWE. So you guys, obviously...
I will say this right now. I don't watch TNA. Haven't watched TNA for over 5 years.
Do you follow TNA?
TNA?
Do you follow TNA as in on social media? No. Sometimes we don't have a choice because the news updates are there right slap bang in front of our face, and you kind of have to follow it.
The only things of TNA I have seen recently is when the Hardys had all their matches at the compound. I've not watched anything other than that, and that was just because Broken Matt Hardy is by far the best thing Matt Hardy has ever done with his career.
I 100% agree with that. What do you are we going to see the Hardys? I don't think we're going to see them at WrestleMania. It was rumoured, obviously, when they left TNA, that they were going to go to WWE. And, of course, they started those rumours on Twitter. Are we going to see them there the night after Mania, do you think? The Raw after Mania? Obviously, at the moment, the Ring of Honor Tag Team Champions, but I think that could be a very, very clever ruse. Go into Ring of Honor before WWE, give the impression that that's what they're doing, that the tag team champions there, and then just before Mania, leave Ring of Honor and actually go and finish their stints and get the big payday at WWE.
Well, they're scheduled to face the Young Bucks on the 1st of April.
Okay.
Now, if they drop those belts to the Young Bucks on the 1st of April, which is it's likely, it's possible it could happen. Then yeah, I think you're probably going to be right. I think we might have a Hardy Boy insurgent back in WWE. They'll just turn up and be all like, "You knew we'd come."
But would they? Are they going to be permitted to use the broken and the delete and the broken Matt Hardy gimmick? Are they going to be able to use that?
I don't see how, because a lot of people might notice JB, Jeremy Borash in TNA was the guy that was booking a lot of those broken segments. He was working with the Hardys to book those segments. Now, we know that in WWE, creative control is not really something that gets thrown around very often. I can't see them handing the Hardys creative control and free reign to go and basically do whatever they want. I can't see that happening.
I didn't ask that. I asked if they would be allowed to use the gimmick.
Well, apparently TNA are threatening TNA are threatening lawsuits now. But I think the intellectual property belongs to Matt Hardy. Really, when it's his gimmick. Now, Chris, what you say there about Jeremy Borash and about them not getting the creative control. Now, my counterpoint to that would be basically they didn't want the Hardys last year or the year before when Jeff Hardy was just Jeff Hardy and Matt Hardy was just fat and moaning. They didn't want him then. Oh no, I've got a long history with calling Matt Hardy fat. He blocked me on Twitter, and only recently has unblocked me because a friend of mine sent him a direct message and said, "Can you unblock my friend? He now finds you incredibly entertaining." Fair play to Matt Hardy, he did. No one wanted the Hardys until Matt Hardy had his head injury. It was his quote unquote head injury and started doing the broken gimmick, which has been one of the most entertaining things of last year. I think it's the only reason that TNA had lasted as long as it did last year. Everyone knows they were hanging on by the skin of the teeth.
Okay, I will say this. potentially yes, they could keep the gimmick, but I think if they were to take that gimmick to the Fed, it would be heavily watered down from what we've already seen. And the simple reason for that is because WWE isn't known for necessarily taking a lot of risks in their storylines, and I can't see them doing all this fourth wall breaking shit like time traveling and time warps and stuff. I just can't see that.
Completely agree, Chris. I can see it being more of a case of, I mean, they're going to give them a sliver of creative control if they go back there. And then it's going to be a case more of, oh, look, Matt Hardy's lost it, and Jeff Hardy's lost it. They've come back and they're both mental. That's what it's going to be. They won't let them be like, oh, yeah, Matt Hardy's a time-traveling, crazy, mad soul who's been on the air for, thousands of years.
Let's have a look at it the other way, though. That the WWE have got the excellent platform to be able to do that. Could they bring the Hardy Boys back and have them work in the WWE style on TV? But giving them that time on the network, maybe their own show on the network, where they do get a bit more creative control.
How much would you love to see a Matt Hardy show on the network? Just Matt Hardy there playing piano. Then having some mad vision and talking to a drone.
Hey, never say never. Right, guys, let's move on. Obviously, the names that have been coming up with the Hardy Boys over the last couple of weeks are Drew Galloway, Bully Ray. Obviously, all left TNA now. Arguably, over the last year or so, they've been the four biggest names in TNA. TNA have lost a lot of, you're saying that we mentioned earlier on, Austin Aries, Bobby Roode, Samoa Joe, AJ Styles. They've lost a lot of big talent. The WWE, or the ex-WWE names that TNA were drafting in, they've all disappeared, or anyone with significant name has disappeared also. Have TNA got a real future? They've been bought out by Anthem. Have they got a real future?
I don't know. TNA have, and have always had, an amount of guys on their roster who are fantastic. Look at some of the guys you've got there now. Eddie Edwards, David Richards, Trevor Lee. All these guys, absolutely fantastic, brilliant names, really fantastic wrestlers. But TNA have done what TNA always do. Oh look, there's an ex-WWE guy. We'll put him on telly.
Yeah.
And we'll make him the focal points of our show.
Well, Alberto Del Rio or Alberto Del Patron, whatever he goes under these days, he turns up at TNA on his first night and wins the title.
Exactly.
For me, as soon as I saw that news on social media, I was like, well, what a way to shit on your own roster. Have this guy that's been released from WWE or after he's released from WWE or whatever, he's got well-documented issues, problems, and he's rocking up to the TNA tapings and winning the world title on his opening night. For me, that just shits on everything that TNA and the TNA wrestlers have been trying to do for months or years now.
This is why TNA it's a sinking ship, and anyone who's on there, I don't know. I don't watch the product anymore. I haven't enjoyed the product for a long, long time. They've got some really great workers there, but the great workers that, if you really want to, go back and watch older stuff of them. You don't need to watch the TNA stuff because it's not worth having to watch that product just to watch those guys. Eddie Edwards and Davey Richards and Trevor Lee, they should all jump, go back to Ring of Honor. I know Trevor Lee's never been a Ring of Honor guy, but Eddie Edwards and Davey Richards, they cut their teeth in Ring of Honor. Go there. They should have signed to WWE when the opportunity arisen, but they didn't. No idea why that didn't happen.
No, I've had some. I don't know if it's an insider scoop on that or what. I have seen it floating around, so it's certainly out there. But they did get offered a deal as a tag team. WWE were only interested in them as a tag team, and David Richards, when he was going through his paramedics course and obviously starting a family, he didn't want that full-time schedule. So because Davey turned it down, Eddie got refused. Now, whether or not obviously those guys are separated on TNA. Eddie is or was the world champion, so he's having a good singles run. Whether or not that changes or not, I don't know. But going back to what you're saying about the guys like Davey and not so much Davey, but certainly Eddie and Trevor Lee and anybody else with an ounce of talent there and ambition, are they just waiting for that call from NXT? Are they not going back to Ring of Honor because are they getting paid more at TNA? Have they got a better TV deal at TNA? Is the work schedule better at TNA, as in a lighter work schedule? Or are they just sat there waiting to get that call from Triple H?
That's the reason a lot of the guys left was reportedly Dixie Carter was giving these guys ridiculous contracts that they had no right to be actually probably earning. And now you've got guys like, this is the thing, this is the frustrating thing for me with TNA. I used to watch TNA all the time, to the point where I used to do a weekly podcast talking about just mostly TNA. I had to stop doing that because I literally couldn't watch the product anymore. It was that bad. And like I got back into it a couple of months ago, and you had guys like Eddie Edwards as your world champion, and they have really crafted this identity for themselves over the past couple of years, despite all of the monetary issues they've had. And of course, now you have Jeff Jarrett is back in control now. Dutch Mantel, Zeb Coulter is now he's on the booking team with Jeff Jarrett. And straight away, like you say, Alberto Del Rio comes in and wins their world title and kind of shits all over the progress that these characters have made. But more importantly, the reason these guys are left was because Dixie Carter was offering these guys ridiculous contracts. And now Jeff Jarrett's coming in, these guys are coming in, they're saying, okay, and the Anthem's obviously in control, they're saying, well, these guys, you shouldn't be paying these guys. We can't afford to pay these guys these kind of ridiculous contracts for the work, for the schedule that they're running. So obviously, guys like, the Hardys and Galloway obviously aren't going to take lightly. That's the reason a lot of these guys left, was because they wanted to undercut the contracts and give them more realistic contracts. And that's the reason a lot of the guys have left. I'm optimistic because, I don't know. I hope that it's whether they have a future isn't really the question. It's whether they're going to survive, sure, but whether it's going to be worth watching, I don't know.
Well, there you go. I think anybody that's involved in the wrestling business, whether it be from a promoter or a worker or even a fan, everybody wants to see it turn itself around. Everybody wants to see TNA become a success or become a bigger success. It's not. We don't just want to see TNA surviving, because that's not a good sign. We want them to project themselves to where they've always said that they are and thought that they are, as the number 2 in America. Okay, they've got a TV deal, but for me, they're not number 2. Ring of Honor are above TNA, to me.
I know this might sound so cynical and horrible on my part. Yeah, maybe guys might be out of work. They might not, though. I don't really care if TNA survives or not. Right? There are other places to go now in the States, and soon enough there will be other places with TV contracts. Ring of Honor is the number 2 company in the US now.
I would say it's not a point anymore. It's not really the case anymore if it's just WWE or TNA. You go to one or the other. You've got all these indies now that are getting over huge in America. You have choice where you can go and work.
Well, that's true. A lot of guys don't even follow the mainstream shows, and they are literally just independent wrestling fans. A lot of guys won't watch TNA, Ring of Honor, WWE. They'll just literally go to their local shows or travel up and down America just going to see the indie scenes, because there's a lot more going on and there's a lot more interesting on the indie scene. Right, guys, we're going to go very, very quickly. Let's talk WWE very, very quickly. Obviously, WrestleMania is just around the corner. It's, 2-3 weeks away now. There will be another episode of the iSax Wrestling Podcast before WrestleMania, and then there will be a WrestleMania special episode, which I hope both you guys will join me on. One thing I do want to ask you, with regards to WWE, obviously we touched on the WUK before, and they just recently announced that they are doing a UK tour, which is huge for WWE. I believe it's good for them, and it's excellent for us as well on this side of the Atlantic. Some big matches happening at WrestleMania, and obviously we've got the Hall of Fame, which I always look forward to every year, and one of the latest guys just to be announced, Ravishing Rick Rude. What's your thoughts on Rick Rude finally going into the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, I feel like he's the last of that generation. Well, him and Bulldog, I'd say, were the last of that generation that should be in.
Do you think Bulldog will go in? Is there still time for any more to go in this year?
If anyone else goes in this year,
it'll be who, sorry?
Anyone else, because you've only got Beth Phoenix going in. I mean, Beth Phoenix going in is a shocker, because
bullshit.
It feels like she was around for it doesn't feel like she was around long enough to warrant that. But never mind, eh?
There you go.
But Rick Rude going in, fantastic. Probably the last of that line, that line of 80s, early 90s guys that really deserve to be in there.
Yeah, there's Owen, but I don't think that's going to happen.
I was going to say, there's only 2 guys other than Rick Rude that I'd like to see going there from that generation, from that era, and it would be the British Bulldog, David Boy Smith, and it would be Owen Hart. We all know why Owen's not allowed to go in there at the moment. Bulldog, I'm not quite sure why he's not been inducted into the Hall of Fame yet.
Yeah.
But
to be honest, I'm not really sure. But every year there's a push. Every year there's a campaign and a push for it. Every year it seems to go unheard. But hopefully that'll change next year, or maybe even change this year, or it'll change at some point.
I'd like to think so.
I just hope he eventually gets the appreciation that he deserves. Him, do you know what? Not just him though. Dynamite Kid as well.
Dynamite Kid, absolutely. Good call.
Absolutely.
But everyone knows Dynamite Kid was, he was a wrestler's wrestler.
Do you think the problem with the Dynamite Kid is that he's still alive, and I don't mean that horribly, because he's quite a vulnerable character. He's quite outspoken. He doesn't have a lot of good things to say about WWE, which doesn't mean that he won't get inducted. A lot of the guys that are in the Hall of Fame didn't have a lot of good things to say about the WWE. But do you think, until that point where, if he's alive, he's going to have to be invited to his own induction ceremony? Do you think that's the problem?
Yeah, I think you got a good point there, Steve. Yeah, I think it'd be like the Savage thing. I don't think Savage would have been inducted before he passed away.
Guys, we're going to have to wrap up this segment of the show. We've gone over a little bit. I'm going to have to edit this down, but I want to thank you both for coming on today, taking the time out of your busy days and talking about the things that I'm not able to talk about at this time. I will make sure that I go on to New Japan World on the New Japan on-demand service. I will subscribe. I will check it out. Hopefully on the next show, when I've got you guys on, I'll be able to interact a little bit more about what's going on overseas. But until then, thank you very, very much, guys. I will see you in a couple of weeks' time for this show. And then, like I said, we will also be doing the WrestleMania special.
Okay, thank you very much for having us, Steve.
Cheers.
This is Klondyke Kate, and you've been listening to the iSax Wrestling Podcast.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm joined today by a legitimate living legend of the British wrestling world. With a career spanning 40 years this year, which is an accolade for any professional and any profession. My guest broke boundaries and raised bars in the world of British female wrestling back in the days when females were there literally just to tick boxes. She was the first ever female to compete on the original ITV World of Sport, stood opposite the legendary Big Daddy. She's also become a mentor to many aspiring workers over the years and continues to support and aid the British wrestling scene to this date. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for the legendary Klondyke Kate, Jayne Hansford. How you doing, Jayne?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm very good. It's excellent to hear your voice again. It's been too long.
A Stokey together, eh?
Two Stokies out of Stoke, that's what we are, Jayne. Actually, I really want to get into this. Obviously, we're friends on social media. We've known each other knocking on near 20 years.
Long time,
A
yeah.
very long time. I think when I first met you was probably, I got into the business in 97, so I probably met you around about 98, 99.
Probably did. I can remember meeting you. Can't remember the date, but I always remember meeting you, and I remember meeting you obviously working for Orig. So I just can't remember where we were, but I do remember a couple of of the battles we had. So yeah. I remember those.
And I remember something we did in Rill together. I'm not quite sure why we did it, but I remember there being a female worker called, was it Miss Minx? I think she was called Miss Sarah.
Yes,
you two were in some sort of confrontation, and then I got the nod from Oregon. Right, go down there, get in some sort of feud with Kate, and suddenly, out of nowhere, Miss Minx became my girlfriend, and I got in there, and I remember getting in there, and you said, right, just give us a kick, and just derby me, give us a kick and derby. And I was absolutely petrified. I was like, oh my God, what have I stiff her? What have I hurt this woman? And I was bricking it.
Nothing like that ever bothered me, because I think when you're in the moments as well, you don't even think about it. You get on with what you're doing. And Ori used to give me so many surprises that I was kind of used to waiting for something else to come along when I didn't expect it. So, Orig just was a man of the moment, and every time he thought something up, he'd send somebody down to you, and you'd think, right, here we go, I'm ready to go get on with this.
Go with the flow.
Yeah, used to it.
But it works, and I remember coming backstage and saying to you, was that okay for you, Jayne? You were just like, lad, don't worry, you were light as a feather, and I was so relieved. I was breaking myself going backstage. Like, what's she got to do? What's she got to say? But no, I really enjoyed the small bits that we've had together, Jayne, over the years. The shame we couldn't do more, but obviously when I was coming into the business, as you said, it was kind of when you were moving away.
I was still
slowing down maybe.
Yeah, I was kind of working for All Star then, and not doing as much, because at one time it was hectic. It was work every day, and as I got older and also put myself into another career as well, I kind of split it between the two then. So I did sort of calm down a bit by then, but I could never walk away from it. Never. It's been really hard.
Oh, that's it. I mean, I think it's fair to say that once you're actually in this business and you actually start making a name for yourself in this business, it's very hard to walk away. Very hard to walk away.
Do you know what? It's really weird. I remember always Giant Haystacks, he was such a character, you know. He had a really dry sense of humour, and I never forget him saying to me once, I was talking to him in all seriousness, because he had quite a dark sense of humour and a very dry sense of humour. But this particular day, we were talking about how we felt about when we'd actually finish being in the business, and he said to me, he said, the only way I can describe it, he said, because I've took myself away from it a couple of times, he said it's like a bereavement. He said it's a death. He said it's the most awful thing. Your life just changes. And I thought, no, it can't be that bad, you know. But as it worked out, being away from it, if it's been your life, it's one of the hardest things you ever have to do, is walk away and stay away. And that's something I've never been able to do to this day. So it's really hard.
Yeah, I mean, especially, I suppose, given these days as well, with the, I mean, obviously you're an avid user of social media, just like I am, and it's there, it's right in front of you, whether you choose it to follow it and to support it or not, it's there in front of you. I mean, you have a lot of friends, obviously, that are still involved in the wrestling business, and as do I. If I were to walk away from wrestling now and walk away from Britannia Wrestling right now, I'd still be connected with these people, and I'd still see it on a daily basis in my life. And I think the only way that I could ever switch off is to say, right, okay, well, I'm going to have to lose all elements of social media. I'm not going to have to communicate with these people anymore. And I wouldn't want to do that.
And it's exactly what you say. The only way you could walk away, I could walk away from it and never see it again if I left social media, but I can't. I also love to see what's going on, how things are new, how people are changing, you know, what the older generation still think of what's going on today. And as you know, I'm very outspoken, very opinionated, but sadly I'm like that in all walks of life, you know. That is just my personality. I've always got something to say for myself, and I always have had, but I find that the length of time I've been in the wrestling business, I actually feel I have a right to say what I feel about it. I don't cross other people's opinions. If they've got a different opinion, fine. You know, I've got to respect that, but it doesn't mean to say I'm going to at all agree with it. You know what I mean? And if I think it's wrong, then I will say something. But at the end of the day, everybody's opinion is everybody's opinion.
Absolutely,
I'm just there to look and see what's going on. And sometimes there's people I want to help, sometimes there's people I don't want to help. It just depends. And it's like everything else. You like some people, you don't like them. Every walk of life has that kind of thing going on. In any kind of business, there's somebody you take to, somebody you just can't take to, and there's somebody you want to really help. And you know, most times I really like to help, but if they don't want it, they don't want it. But half the time they do, you know. So it's a nice kind of balance, really, because for every arsehole, I'm sorry to say, there's 3, 4, 5 people who are absolutely, you know, dedicated to what they do and want to get better every day. And no matter what anybody says to you, you never stop learning, ever. You never stop learning.
That's so true. That's so true.
You know, you can pick up things, watching something bad, that learns you a lesson. It learns you not to do it that way. So everything you see is a lesson to be learned in wrestling. So, you know, that's why I can't get away from it. I just cannot get away from it. And I also love the people that I was always around in my time, and that, you know, they're still in touch with me. They may be slightly older than me, because I kind of was the baby of them lot, if you know what I mean. They're in the 70s now, or going into 70. I'm 55 this year, so I was kind of 15 years behind everybody. But watching them go is very sad, you know. But the ones that are still here, my God, they've got some life in them, you know. Full of it.
I mean, you touched on there that, you know, it is a lot of the old school crew, if you like, you know, the World of Sport originals and guys from before and guys from after that you're still connected with. It's great that I'm seeing this kind of resurgence of the old school. I've had so many people, the old school workers, that have added me on social media, and I've added them, and it's great to see how involved they are in the business still. I mean, a few years ago, when I first got into the business, obviously I was very young, I was like 16 years old, just turned, and this was 97, 98, and I used to get told by the likes of Gary Welsh, Drew McDonald, Boston Blackie, that I got in the business too late, and that there would be no business in 10 years' time, and if you're getting in it for the long term, if you're getting in it for the money, British wrestling is not the career for you. And a lot of the guys were very bitter back then, and this is the time when Orig Williams especially, and a few other promoters up and down the UK were doing the WWF tribute shows. And I think a lot of guys kind of felt that was a little bit demeaning. They'd gone from the golden era of British wrestling when they were making a little bit of money, but they were kind of getting more exposure, more fame than they were money at the time. And then they lost all that, and they were just literally plodding along from hall to hall, from camp show to camp show, pretending to be WWF wrestlers, and a lot of guys were bitter about that. And the common phrase that I used to always hear is, the job's fucked, the business is fucked. Yeah. And now, all these years later, some of the guys that used to say that to me have kind of gone full circle, because of the way the industry's gone now, and they're supporting it, and I think that's amazing to see the new school and the old school coming together for the sake of British wrestling.
Well, that was one of my sayings, because what I've learned now through all these years is wrestling has ebbs and flows. It comes up, it goes down. You know, we're having it so good at the moment. Just the flow of everything has gone fantastic, and the fact that there are old timers mixing with what's going on now. And I mean, I'm not knocking what's going on now. It's absolutely fantastic. Times change, and you've got to go with the times if you want to keep up with it. But it's nice that they are mixing, because there's no such thing as us and them. We're supposed to be a community, a wrestling community.
Absolutely.
And like you say, you will like people. You'll like the way they do things, and then there'll be people who you think are total arseholes and, you know, think shouldn't be in the business. But that, once again, is just an opinion. There's room for everybody, I think, and there's room for all different kinds of wrestling. And, you know, I sit and wonder sometimes. I watch some of this stuff. I'm very aware of people really hurting themselves. I find that hard to take when I know that a lot of the money in the business isn't there. There isn't a lot of money in it for these people. For some, yes, amazing. You know, if you want to risk your life for a couple of $1 million a year, then fair enough. But for the kind of average wage that a wrestler was earning or is earning, I find that it's a lot to do for the kind of money you get and the risk you're taking, you know. So that could be a topic of conversation that I'd go on forever, you know, with people. So
as of late, I mean, I completely agree with you. I mean, I used to be a wrestler for between 11, 12, 13 years, and I never earned a lot at all. But that wasn't the reason I was in the business. Now, because of the world of sports revamp, and because of the WWE UK, a lot of our stars have the spotlight on them now. A lot of the British talent are finally getting the credit and the recognition that they deserve. And I have noticed that the talent that I'm not going to talk figures, because you shouldn't do that, but the talent that wanted double figures last year now want triple figures this year. And you know what? I have no problem paying that as a promoter and as a booker, because they deserve it and they work very hard for it. And the way I see it is, if they're getting paid more, it really shows what position British wrestling's at the moment.
It does, and if you treat people right, you know they will always go that extra mile for you, which is what happens in most businesses. You treat your employees right, they'll always do good for you. But because it's doing so well at the moment, you know, there's lots of really fantastic houses at the minute, and you might do it for a hobby. But there are actually people who want to try and earn a living from it, which is, you know, really hard. It's not so hard now because things are really looking up, but it has been for people. And at one point, I actually think it did more harm than good, because young people were coming into the job, going to work for people. And I'm not stupid. Course promoters are going to take people who'll work for nothing, as long as it doesn't make their show a bad show.
Yeah.
But I just don't agree. I think if you've something good about yourself, you should sell it, not give it away, you know, and maybe that's the wrong attitude to have in life. But for me, wrestling was first and foremost the love of my life. Everything in my life's always been about wrestling. Secondly, at the time, it was my living. So, and I actually made quite good money for a girl, and you know, for the time as well, and really lucky, never ever got shortchanged or shit on. So I think I'm one of the very lucky ones who did quite well. But now I don't know, this minority just kind of winds me up a bit. But once again, it's their choice, and
yeah, I suppose it's each to their own. I suppose different guys do look at it different ways. Some guys look at it as well. They kind of get my foot on the door there, do a bit of a favour for them, showing them what I can do, and then there's going to be long-term bookings. But I completely agree with what you're saying. I do understand where you're coming from. And there you have it. There was the first half of the interview with Klondyke Kate. Again, my apologies that you do have to go to iTunes to download episode 2, but it's well worth it, trust me. Thank you very much for tuning in. It has been an amazing experience doing this podcast, doing the pilot episode of the podcast, and without knowing, I would be doing episode 2 immediately. There will be another full episode of iSax Wrestling Podcast, which will just be one download next time, I do assure you, within the next week or so. So keep your eyes peeled to Facebook and Twitter. All the shout outs and all the link ups are coming now. Hope you've enjoyed the show. I would love to hear what you thought about it. Drop me a line on Facebook, Twitter, via personal message, direct message, email, however you can. Or if you know me personally, come and speak to me face to face and tell me what you thought about this. How can I improve? What would you like to hear more of? What would you like to hear less of? I'd be very, very interested to hear that, and I would appreciate the feedback. So for now, thank you very much. This has been the iSax Wrestling Podcast. Hopefully, I'll be back with you in a couple of seconds when you go and download episode 2. We will be back with a WrestleMania special just before WrestleMania, so keep your eyes peeled for that. I hope you've enjoyed listening to the podcast as much as I've enjoyed making it, so thank you once again very, very much. Peace out.
You have been listening to the iSax Wrestling Podcast. Follow Steve Saxon on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at iSax Podcast. And remember to subscribe and 5-star rate this podcast on iTunes. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Saxon has left the building.